Hi everyone, welcome to today's webinar. My name is Susana Lopes. I'm one of the product managers at Onfido. And today we're going to be talking about the role of biometrics and KYC in seamless onboarding. So to get started, just a little bit about Onfido. Our vision is to create an open world where identity is key to access. And we do this in 195 countries for over 1,500 clients globally. We've taken in a fair bit of funding, and our team's about 200 people right now. We're very lucky to be backed by some of the world's smartest investors, such as Salesforce Ventures, Oxford University, M12, and we work with some great organizations such as Revolut, Remitly, Nutmeg, and many more. Here are some more companies that we work with globally, a big footprint in financial services, remittances, and all sorts of great fintechs that are doing some great work. So we offer a suite of KYC products, and that starts with our proprietary technology around verifying the authenticity of government-issued identity documents and proving the ownership of those documents through facial biometrics, but also helping you prove the address of individuals through bank statements in the UK. And we have some integrations with some great companies helping you prove name, date of birth, and address, as well as watch lists, PEPs, and sanctions, and the like. This is all offered in a cross-platform way. So we offer direct integrations with our API, but also native mobile SDKs and excellent experiences across the web and cross-device. So you always capture the best quality image and provide the best experience. All of this is then returned to you through a dashboard as well as an API with incredibly granular results, so you can action and automatically decide what to do with the users. So for example, here a document was expired, therefore we told you everything else was fine, just that the document was expired. All right, that's our little blurb about Onfido. Let's actually get into the content. So what are we talking about today? We want to talk about seamless client onboarding. And today I'm going to be talking about 4 aspects of this problem, which are convenience, proportionality, asking for less, and removing fear and protecting. So first off, let's start about convenience. Convenience really has become table stakes in onboarding. And if you think about it, when you wanted to open a bank account, say, traditionally you'd have to go to a branch, and that decision might take a couple of days, and you would be told via the mail, and the whole process would take a little while. Then you started seeing these experiences pop up where these branches are printing out the card in store, and they would give you an account straight away. Metro Bank did this, which was extremely innovative at the time, and people were really excited because they could get a bank account the same day. But more recently, we've started seeing accounts being created in minutes, and this is where challenger banks are really making their big entrance and their big impact in the client experience. So much so that they put that in the front page of their website as their main value proposition. This is an example from Tide. Open a business account in minutes. This is what they believe is the most important thing that you should know when you land on their website. Same thing from Arrow Money. Not on the hero messaging, but in the second sentence there, get your account in under 3 minutes with no credit checks. And finally, looking at Monese, fast and free account opening. This is the main value proposition that they decided to open with. It is such a critical table stakes situation that things need to be instantaneous and fast. And yet 45% of people abandon the sign-up process due to a poor user experience. So this is critical to get right. Convenience means being successful on the first attempt. So at Onfido, the way that we think about this is by being relentless in the way that we develop our capture experience, which are provided in SDKs, as we talked about, where we are constantly trying to get the most convenient way for users to go through that experience. And this results in some great conversion rates, where, for example, here we're talking about 95% of people being successful in their first attempt. And how do we do this? We do this by giving extremely detailed guidance when the person is going through the flow, such as detecting glare, detecting blur, detecting whether or not the barcode is readable, or even auto-capturing the passport. Convenience also means not being left out and having the same experience regardless of who you are. When you think about how people are traditionally verified, how KYC is carried out, a lot of the times there are direct integrations with credit rating agencies or utility providers. And what happens is that the younger you are, the less likely you are to be in that database, simply because you haven't been an active a professional or taken out a loan or a mortgage or anything like that yet. So you're less likely to be in that database. And so that means that you're much more likely to fail that check and be asked to go through a much more cumbersome, a much less delightful experience than your peers who might be older. The same thing goes for people who are not nationals of the UK. So in the UK, most people, on average, will be present in the credit rating agencies databases. Where if you've just arrived into the country, you're much less likely to be found in these databases, and you're much more likely to have a worse experience. So at Onfido, we really think about this, and we really think about being able to widen access so that anybody can access the products and services that they need. And one way to widen access, the way that we try to do that, is by supporting as many identity documents as possible. We accept over 4,500 separate documents, and that is including all of the versions that are continuously being released by governments as they make their documents more secure. We also think about not being left behind because maybe you have an accessibility challenge. So, for example, we do over 200 user testing sessions a year to make sure that our SDK is usable and convenient and easy to use. But we also collaborate with leading disability charities and associations, such as the Royal National Institute of the Blind or the Digital Accessibility Center. So that was about convenience. So now let's talk about proportionality. So risk-based approach is a very hot topic, and I believe it is the key to a delightful user experience. And when we think about proportionality, there's two things I'd like to highlight here. First, the way you verify someone's identity needs to be proportionate to the value that they believe they will get for doing that for you. So one of the ways that you can do that is really articulating the value of your service ahead of inconveniencing someone for asking them for their identity documents. So that's one thing to think about when you think about proportionality. The other angle is proportionality to the risk you're trying to mitigate by asking for that identity to be verified. So here we have a plot of user friction that you're introducing versus the risk that you're actually mitigating. And what we have highlighted here are some of the techniques that you can use to identify someone with a service such as with Onfido. So with the identity databases, you introduce relatively little friction. Everybody knows what their name is, what their address is, but it's still a little bit annoying to type it. When you ask for a document, obviously you need to have it on you, so that's a little bit more friction, but obviously you get a much higher assurance that that person is indeed themselves, rather than just me typing in my mom's details because I know where she lives, I know her date of birth, all of that kind of stuff. And then increasingly you add a little bit more friction, such as adding the proof of you owning the document, so asking for the facial biometrics as well, and again you mitigate a bit more risk. So thinking about, for this user, for this thing that I'm trying to access, what is a proportional way to verify their identity that mitigates the risk that I need to mitigate right now, is a really important concept. And then you can start thinking about, okay, so if I know if I know what kind of risk I'm trying to mitigate, when should I be mitigating that risk? So here I wanted to share with you a couple of examples of how our clients do this. So in this example here, what you're trying to do is minimize the friction and delay the need to ask someone for an identity document, because that's considered higher friction. So essentially, you onboard the person, you ask them for their details, and only when they are accessing a higher risk product do you actually ask that person to verify their identity with a more robust method, such as document verification. And an example of that would be Revolut. So you can sign up to Revolut at any point, but as soon as you want to activate your card so you can start spending with a physical card, they actually ask you to do the identity verification. And in this case, they use the document and selfie products. Another way to do it is to actually front load the identity verification process with a real clear goal and real clear motivation. And here it's crucial that you articulate the value of your services before you ask people to go through this flow. Another benefit is that when you ask for the document upfront, you can actually extract the information that's on the document itself and use that to pre-fill a form. So you save the user time for not having to type their details again. And you can use this information to then do, say, anti-money laundering or watch list lookups directly with very accurate information that doesn't have spelling mistakes or any errors when the users might autocorrect accidentally while typing. An example of this would be Bung. So Bung does a very clear value proposition explanation before they ask you for their identity verification, but they don't allow you to access any services before you have done this, because they believe they will get a higher assurance that you are indeed who you say you are before you take any action with their product. So that was around proportionality, right? Proportionality to the risk that you're mitigating and proportionality to the value proposition that you're offering the user. Now let's talk about asking for less. Here I wanted to show you some examples about how you can be creative with how you verify your users in a way that makes it easier for them by asking them for less things. Asking for less and doing more for your users. Here's an example from one of our clients where before they started working with us, what they used to do was ask for your name, date of birth, and your address, and then they would ask you to show a proof of address, such as a utility bill or a bank statement. This resulted in a low-level assurance that you are who you say you are, simply because it's very easy to know someone else's details and access some of their mail or examples of proof of address. It was also very inconvenient because it's not everyone that has these utility bills lying around, and when they do, they're often online and then you have to print it out. It was just generally very inconvenient for their users, and they suffered from drop-off because of this experience. Instead, what they have done was they transitioned to identity document verification and video liveness. Not only did this increase the level of assurance that indeed that person is who they say they are, but also it is more convenient, as it's much more likely that the user will have access to their identity document, probably their driver's license, and the driver's license also contains the address information. They furthermore used clever techniques to validate that address with things that they were already doing. So this client at some point posts a prepaid card to the user's address, which means that when the card is activated, they essentially have proof of address. They have proof that that user had access to that address. So here, not only are they making the journey at a higher assurance level, but also they're still verifying and complying with their regulations, and they're creating a much more seamless experience, as the users are much more likely to have access to their identity document, and obviously they will always have their face with themselves. And now let's talk about the last topic. We talked about convenience, we talked about proportionality, we talked about asking for less and being creative with the processes that you already follow. And finally, let's talk about removing the fear and protecting. Let's protect your users from fraud. One key thing to mention here is the simple ask of please verify your identity already says a lot about your brand and already makes a mark in your customer's mind that you care about their identity and that you care about their security. So this is an important thing to remember. And the other part of that is, yes, optics are great, but let's be serious about tackling fraud. The recommendation that we have is that you should partner with someone that really understands the type of fraud that is happening out there, because it is constantly evolving. It is extremely cheap to buy a fake identity document today, about $35 on this particular website, or you can use Bitcoin for more privacy in the transaction. It is extremely easy to find online editable templates so you can make the document yourself in Photoshop. Or you can go to a shop and they will make it for you while you wait. At Onfido, we take a multiple-step approach to verifying the authenticity of identity documents. We verify that the integrity of the image is untampered with, that it was captured live. Then we extract the data from that identity document such that you can either pre-fill a form, or, as we mentioned, maybe you want to use that information to check AML checks or PEPs and sanctions. We then do a fraud assessment of that document. We then do a sophisticated fraud assessment of that document. And finally, we verify the ownership of the document with the facial biometrics. Here are in more detail the exact checks that we're conducting on the different identity documents. Today, given the topic that we had around biometrics, I wanted to focus on the facial verification and the liveness verification as the main drivers to proving document ownership, and show you some of the technology that we use there. So when you look at verifying the ownership of an identity document, essentially what we want to do is make sure that the person on the identity document is the same person that is using it to prove their identity. So the first thing to do is to extract the face from the identity document and then compare the two faces, the face provided by the user during the flow, and make sure that indeed it is the same person. So Onfido has built its own face matching algorithm. The reason why we have done this is that when we tried off-the-shelf solutions, we found that those solutions often weren't able to detect faces on the identity document about 10% of the time. And this is because there are partial occlusions on identity documents, such as security features, reflections, and glare. And so by training it in-house, we were able to recuperate some of that 10% so that we have a much higher probability of being successful in matching this face. As soon as you ask users to show their face during a flow, if they are indeed fraudulent, the first thing they will try to do is not show their real face and find the face of the person that they're trying to impersonate. As such, they might choose to take a photo of the identity document instead, or Google that person's name and take a photo of that, or print something out and print a photo of that. These are extremely common attack vectors, and they account for about 2% of our volumes today. If they are slightly more sophisticated, or if there is a more enticing prize to be won if they're able to dupe the identity verification process, they might start doing things like printing out a face and blinking through the eyes, or maybe they might go on a website such as that'smyface.com, where they can upload a single photo of someone and receive through about $300 a 3D mask of that individual's face, where they can blink through the eyes and it is relatively realistic and 3D. Or they might simply find a video of that person on the internet, such as YouTube or Vine or Instagram, and play that video back to the camera. Finally, in more extreme scenarios,
we're entering an era in which our enemies can make it look like anyone is saying anything at any point in time.
In extreme scenarios, they might actually use techniques such as deep faking, which is something that was developed by some university researchers, and it is where someone is able to manipulate an existing video to make someone else say something that they didn't do or say. This is something that you can do live, and I have a couple of examples here.
Like Jordan Peele. This is a dangerous time.
Essentially, Jordan Peele is controlling President Obama's face in real time from a pre-existing video, which is, a little bit more esoteric and extremely rare. We have seen this once or twice in production, but these are real threats that are constantly evolving and becoming cheaper and easier to do as the costs go down. So in terms of how we fight this, our solution is based on active liveness, where we ask the user to say 3 randomly generated digits as well as performing a head movement. This is so that we're able to see the user move their lips and making sure that it is not a 3D mask. And then as the head is turning, we're also able to see if the face is 3D consistent and not actually a printout or something like that. We are face matching, such as we talked about before, making sure the 2 faces on the ID and on the video are present. We are processing the audio to make sure that what the person has said is indeed what we asked them to do. We're tracking the face as it's turning to make sure they're turning in the right direction. We're tracking the mouth, make sure that it's moving, and also making sure that the lips are in sync with the audio. And then we're doing some texture analysis to make sure that it is not a digital screen and that's playing a video instead of a real person. And if any of these flag up the fact that it is a fraudulent attempt, then we will ask an analyst to review the video to make sure that it is indeed a real person. And today I wanted to show you a couple of visualizations on how some of these techniques work. The first one being the texture-based anti-spoofing, where essentially what we're doing here is analyzing patches on the person's face and then looking through examples of what real patches look like versus fake patches look like. So here we have 3 examples. The first one is a real face, the second one is a picture of a pictures, and the third one is a picture of a screen. And by analyzing the texture on the face, the algorithm is classifying each piece of texture as either good or bad, which here we visualized as green or red. And then when an overall score of green is given, this would be automatically passed. If an overall score of red is given, it would be either automatically rejected or flagged for manual review by one of our analysts. We do the same thing on videos where we analyze multiple frames and try to see if the texture matches that of a video or a video of a real genuine person. And here you can see that the video of a screen is giving a majority red, so this would be automatically failed. Here we have some visualizations of the individuals turning their heads, and we can see that for the face that is actually a printout, we can't see that it is not 3D consistent, and therefore this would fail. So that's it for today. These are the 4 topics that we talked about. We talked about how to make sure that your onboarding journey is as convenient as possible and that it doesn't block or discriminate against anyone. We talked about proportionality in terms of the risk mitigated, but also in terms of the value proposition that you're giving to your users. We talked about being creative with your existing processes and asking for less from your users. And we talked about removing the fear and protecting your users from identity fraud. So that was it. My name's Susana Lopes, product manager at Onfido. Very happy to take your questions. Just put them in and we'll get back to you. Thank you so much.